everyone, welcome to Follow the Fun, and in this video I'm going to show you the other half of my ISENGARD army. Now these are some of the first miniatures I painted in the start of my painting journey. I painted them after the soldiers, and they have been through some versions. I have repainted them a couple of times, and then when I was happy with the paint scheme, I have gotten more miniatures and painted them in the same scheme. And so I will just start by showing you the different categories of models, showing you the different captains and special units, and just talk about all of them. Now, what is an ISENGARD scout army without the scouts themselves? Now, here I have 22 scout warriors with a pretty standard paint scheme. I remember painting them in sort of a reddish brown color and then drenching them in rattling grime, which is a sort of dark wash paint, which is just makes everything darker. And then I dry brushed the cloth and leather parts with some skin to make the leather look really worn, and painted the metal, painted the skin, and then just like with the soldiers, freehanded some handprints and white hand emblems on some shields and different heads. And yeah, I just really like the poses of these models. I didn't really bother with all of the little things. Like when I first painted them, I picked out the boots and the gloves with one brown paint, and the skin with another brown paint, and the cloth with another brown paint, and it's just too much work, too little return. These models they're supposed to look really dark and dirty anyway, so you can just drench them in any brown or black, put some metal on there, and the way I sort of make them stand out on the table is with these flowery bases. I actually watched the Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, on a very good TV. It wasn't actually a TV, it was a big screen in my local church. And I noticed that when I looked at the film on this super big screen, it was basically like a cinema screen. I saw that in Rohan there are purple and pink flowers growing, not just the grass and the white flowers. So that was something that I wanted to include on my scouts, to put them in the Rohan setting. And so there are mostly just plastic scouts here, but I have also 3 of the metal ones. And these are really cool miniatures, but I'm not the biggest fan of playing with metal models, because yeah, they tend to chip paint and sort of wear over time. But it's fun to have at least some of the alternate models to play with. And so yeah, that's the scouts, and let me move on to the Mordor orcs. And here they are. Now, I painted these exactly the same way as the scouts. I just wanted to get them done as simply as possible, and so I had come up with a pretty good painting recipe to get these done quickly. So I just cranked them out. And but one thing I did differently was I skipped on the flowers, because in the game there are special rules where if an orc and an Urukai are fighting the same model, they get bonuses to their fighting. And so I wanted an easy way to differentiate between orcs and Urukai, and I thought that was the best way to do it. So I just neglected to put flowers on their bases. Now you might think that this looks like very few orcs for an ISENGARD scout army, and you would be correct. Most of the plastic mortar orcs that I have gone to other armies, and I haven't really wanted to paint too many of them, so I only have, let's see, 10 here. But I do have these, which some people will recognize. Oh, this is not a plastic one, so I guess I have 13. Maybe another one somewhere. No, I don't think so. Anyway, some people might get really excited looking at these miniatures because they are the old metal mortar orcs. But unfortunately, I have to confess that these are recast miniatures. Now, I would have bought the metal ones if they still existed to buy, but they don't, and I don't want to wait for a made-to-order run, and so I just decided to buy recast ones. And my plan is to take all of these and draw a little mark of some kind on the bottom of the base to make it obvious that they are recast. Like take some white paint, for example, or a white pen, and just write RC, for example, or just write recast on the bottom of the bases, so that no one will mistake these for original Games Workshop miniatures. It is a shame that you can't buy these anymore, and if you find them secondhand, they are very expensive, but they're just really cool miniatures, and I wanted to include them. And so those make up the most of my mortar orcs for the army. So that's the mortar orcs, and now I'm going to show you the captains and special units. Now, first here we have Lurtz, and for some reason I don't really play with Lurtz that much. You know, he's a made-up character from the movies, which nothing wrong with that, but I tend to prefer characters that exist in the books, and so I usually just decide to play Uruk scouts rather than Lurtz scouts. But you know, I might try play with him as well, and I think the model is really cool. Now, one thing I did with this model is I took a small piece of wire and I made a bowstring right there on his bow. Normally the bow just sits there on his back, but I added a string for extra realism. And yeah, that's just how he looks. And I painted the white hand on his face as well. So moving on to the main man, Uruk. And he is holding the severed head of Snaga. And nothing too fancy here either. I just painted him up as all the other Urukai, but I was a little more careful with the weathering on the leather and the sort of leopard pattern on his hair. In the movies, it's kind of difficult to see what color the Urukai's skin and hair is. It's sort of just a muddy mess, so you have pretty free reign there to do whatever you want. And I decided to make this sort of animalistic pattern on his hair with contrasting some dark and light colors to make him stand out. And of course some blood on his sword there. And yeah, this is the guy I use as my leader most of the time. He's basically not much more than a captain, but now in the new rules he has a whip, which was missing from the rules for so long. You see, he has a whip on his model, and now he has a strength 1 throwing weapon which reaches 2 inches, which is just really funny that he has that now. And his new rules for taking other orcs' heads and making the orcs fight better is just really flavorful, really fun to play with. And then let's move on to these Urukai carrying the hobbits. And I of course do the same thing as everybody does who has these. I use them as banners to make the orcs fight better, to make the Urukai fight better. It's just good to have banners, and it's nothing wrong with having 2 banners in the same army. And you can see here I tried to get some of the fine details on the hobbits there. One of the few chances to get some color in this army. And there's Merry, looks distressed. Yeah, nothing too fancy here. But now let's move on to some of the more unusual stuff. First off, here is my Urukai Scout Captain. This is just one of the regular plastic Urukai Scouts, but I converted it to have this big ass axe. The haft of this axe is actually just a piece of paper clip, and then I took some plastic glue and just smeared it over the shaft, and that gave it this sort of irregular texture that I could then paint to look more like a wooden shaft than just a super cylindrical wire. And then this axe head is coming from one of the recast Mordor orcs. And yeah, I just think this came together to be a really sweet captain miniature. I haven't actually used him in a game yet, but I surely will do soon. Then we have the captain for the Mordor orcs. And that's just a Mordor orc with a shield that I believe is from some Age of Sigmar kit. Can't really remember. And to make him stand out more on the table, I just smeared his helmet in a bunch of white paint so that you can see him clearly. And he's also one of the biggest Mordor orcs. If you stand him next to the other orcs, he looks pretty big. So yeah, that's that. And then we have Grishnak, which is a named leader. And same thing here, this is just a Mordor orc that I made sure had the correct pose and the correct weapon. And painted some extra color on his pelt here to make him stand out and be noticeable on the table, so that you don't confuse him for a regular orc. And then the last thing, which is kind of funny, the miniature for Snaga, I decided to take one Moria Goblin miniature, and I took one of the miniatures that has a spear, and I cut away the spear and put on a dagger or knife from some kit I had laying around. And yeah, so this is the tiny little guy who is asking for some hobbit meat, and I just think he's really cute, and so I can you know, this is the head of this guy, which is, you know, not very similar, but yeah, I just think this miniature was funny to make, and I didn't want to buy the super expensive Snaga one anyway. And yeah, that's that.
What about them? They're fresh.
They are not for eating.
Now, there's one more thing in this army that I want to show you, and it's not really a gaming piece. It is actually my first ever diorama I made. Now, this right here is... I'm really happy with it. If you haven't noticed already, it's supposed to represent that exact scene where Lurtz is right about to execute Boromir. Right before Aragorn comes and saves him from this brutal execution. The base is of course not playable in Middle-earth strategy battle game. We don't really use oval bases that much. So this is made to be a display piece. This Lurtz is pretty heavily converted. There is this old metal Uruk miniature that has the, or I believe it's the old Lurtz miniature actually, that has a pose very similar to one of the new plastic Uruk. So if you look at this one, this is sort of the pose that this miniature had originally. Put them right next to each other so you can see. And so what I did was, because this is metal, I was able to cut loose the hand from the arrows and raise the hand up to his cheek. And then I also was able to bend the arm from this sort of down position. I had to cut loose the bow from the body right here on the back, which is not visible now, as you can see, and bended the arm to raise the bow up more. And then I made this arrow from a couple of different pieces. I believe the feathers are from a Bjorning's kit. The shaft is some piece of wire, and then the tip is an actual arrow tip. I don't really remember where I got it. I don't really remember where I got it from. So, but anyway, then I also added these sewing string pieces to represent the really thick bowstring that Lurtz has on his bow. And then I actually entered this piece into a local painting competition. I didn't win, but I was really happy with it anyway. I did some attempt on making non-metallic metal on Boromir's sword here. You know, I got this Boromir model just for this diorama, and this little piece of hill is made from some aluminum foil with a bunch of super glue and baking soda and texture paint and little tiny dried up leaves for actual autumn leaves here. And yeah, so that's just something that I have that I think is really cool. So yeah, that is the showcase of my Uruk Scout army. If you liked the video, leave a like, and tell me in the comments which army you would like to see next. or what types of videos you would like to see next. And I hope I see you in the next one. Bye!
Why can't we have some meat?